Good evening, YouTube. It's Colin here. It is Wednesday, the 7th of November. Today's rant, such as it is concerning the child welfare system in the province of Ontario. I'd like to address this short to the three Ontario political party leaders, Mr. Dalton McGuinty, Mr. Howard Hampton, and Mr. John Tory. Gentlemen, you did not address child welfare during the election campaign. You seem to be more concerned about faith-based funding in the schools, which is such a non-issue that it wasn't worth mentioning. I'm going to appeal to all of you when the legislature gets back in December to consider launching a royal commission on child welfare. In my opinion, as a former social worker at the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, child welfare in the province is in a state of crisis. You have got 54 independent corporate entities, private corporate entities called Children's Aid Societies, which are only very, very loosely accountable to the Minister of Children and Family Services. The Children's Aid Societies in the province have no accountability whatsoever directly in the legislature, and the information that the Children's Aid Societies provide the ministry is incomplete and distorted. You may send in your Crown Ward reviewers, you may send in your auditors, but you're not getting a complete picture of what is going on. The serious occurrence reports that the Children's Aid Societies are required to submit to the ministry when a serious occurrence occurs seem to get swept under the rug. I doubt very much whether any of them come to the individual attention of the minister, and none of this is discussed in the legislature because there's no direct accountability of the Children's Aid Societies to the legislature. Now, regardless of a royal commission, if I ever got to testify in front of one, what I would be recommending would be the dissolution of all the 54 Children's Aid Societies in the province, folding them into one ministry responsible for child welfare in the province. That would satisfy the fundamental requirement that child welfare be directly accountable to the legislature, and that the communities, the families, the children, the parents whom the child welfare system of the province serves have recourse to go directly to the politicians to advocate for change and to highlight problems and abuses within the system. Now, I'm going to highlight just one problem that I think speaks to the entire institutional mess in the Ontario child welfare system. The Children's Aid Society of Toronto, in its institutional culture, is an institutionally racist organization. It is institutionally racist by not having adequate representation from the Toronto African, Caribbean, Black community within its managerial structure. So there is a complete knowledge gap in management regarding the needs of those communities. Regardless, 50% of the clients, the children who are brought into care, the families served by the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, are from African, Caribbean, and Black Canadian backgrounds. And there's very little representation in management for these communities. Second indication of institutional racism is one that's got a specific example, but again, indicative of a broad institutional culture. In the Auditor General's report of last year, the Auditor General specifically took issue with a paid junket by an unnamed Children's Aid manager to the People's Republic of China for reasons that the Auditor General did not choose to make known. Now, I was with the Children's Aid Society of Toronto when this junket took place. It cost the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, and consequently the people of the province of Ontario, tens of thousands of dollars. The reason that junket took place was to allow a senior manager to explore setting up an international adoption scheme between the People's Republic of China and families in Canada who, or specifically Toronto, who wish to adopt Chinese babies. Now, the last time I checked, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of children in Toronto in need of good homes. But because the Children's Aid Society of Toronto is governed by a board of directors who draw their life experience from the Toronto business community, Bay Street, and the upper middle classes, Children's Aid Society of Toronto policy is reflected by the needs of those communities. By and large, upper middle class families occasionally buy into the concept that Asian children are smarter than non-Asian children, more compliant than non-Asian children. And unlike the clientele of the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, or at least so the stereotype goes, they do not come with baggage like physical abuse, drug addiction, and emotional abuse prior to being adopted. And this is the institutional racism that this misguided policy bought into. Now, eventually, the notion of being an adoption broker for Chinese babies was dropped. Whether it'll ever be resurrected again, I don't know. But here's the thing. The manager who went to China to explore this racist policy, which incidentally had absolutely nothing to do with the Provincial Child and Family Services Act, had absolutely nothing to do with providing good adoptive homes to Canadian children in the Toronto area. The manager who went to China is now the acting executive director of the Children's Aid Society of Toronto. And that's despite the fact that the Auditor General, in his December 2006 report, chastised the Children's Aid Society, an unnamed Children's Aid Society, for allowing this to happen. Do you think the Children's Aid Society of Toronto really seriously takes seriously the Auditor General's report? No, because the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, being a private corporation, institutionally does not feel that it is accountable to the government or the people of Ontario. That's why I think Children's Aid Societies in general need to be dissolved and reformulated, along with a complete reformulation of the institutional culture into one Ministry of Children and Family Services. Get rid of the institutional racism at the Children's Aid Society of Toronto by getting rid of the Children's Aid Societies. Thank you.